Alright, here we are, straight back into the third video in this series. If you haven't seen the other two, I've got one about heat, noise, and battery of the Surface Pro 3, and also a very long video I've just completed about the hardware in general, just a hardware chat about all aspects of the physical device. Now this one here, this video, is meant to be about the pen, and just a warning again, my videos are long. I say a lot, I say a lot. I don't script these, I'm just babbling about these devices. Consider it a podcast. So if you're trying to get in and out of the video in 2 or 3 minutes, this one's not for you. Everyone else who wants to stick around and listen to me babble, thank you for your ears. So this one is about the pen. Pens are a major aspect, I think, of Windows tablets. They always have been since the original Windows for pen computing back in around 95, I think that came out. And when I bought my first tablet PC in 2003 or so, that of course had a digitizer pen. And in fact, I should try and see if this digitizer works on that, because I've still got it. But the pen broke because it was rubbish. But this is a good pen, and so that's the first point. This is the best pen I've seen on a tablet like this. It feels good. It's made of metal all the way. It screws open. It's got a lot of threads. See, you're not going to break that by sitting on it, because the worry is you can easily strip a thread, or that's the weak point is the thread, but you're not going to strip that. That's really nicely done. It's got a quadruple A in there, and it's got a little tiny watch batteries in the top for the Bluetooth transmitter. This is a Bluetooth transmitter in here, this little button, and these ones here are for the digitizer. Now, I've got a video on my channel about capacitive pens in Windows 8, and it's because I had a tablet, Asus, that just had a capacitive pen, and those are really just fingers. They're just like your finger. This is not like your finger. This is meant to be a pen. It's like a mouse. In fact, the pointer works like a mouse. You get near the screen, a little pointer comes up, or a little dot comes up on the screen showing you the point at which you're activating the screen, and you can then touch down and activate something a bit like your left mouse button, or you can use one of these buttons here for erasing or for a right click. The buttons on top here are for OneNote. They trigger OneNote. I haven't been using that. I do use OneNote, but I haven't been using this feature so much because I don't find myself running around. But obviously, the market there is medical professionals, or anyone who wants to, or army, military, anyone who needs to make notes, like in the old days. Now I'm reading quite a lot of articles which are quite funny, quite amusing, because there's a new generation, obviously, who've never had to write anything by hand. A new generation of bloggers, and all they do is they sit down and they use a keyboard and they type, and that's basically the only work they do and the only thing they do. And I've actually seen someone reviewing a Surface Pro, did not know what to do with the pen, thought you just pointed, you just went and couldn't fathom what you would want to do with a pen, which blows me away. But whatever, so be it. If you don't know what to do with a pen, you just don't know what to do with it. If you know what to do with it, you know why you want a pen. Whether you're an artist, you write, you draw. In particular, even if you're none of those things, the pen is extremely useful, and it always was. I mean, I never bought into this ridiculous thing of Steve Jobs where he'd say, if it's got a pen, then they're doing it wrong. Rubbish. We're not all finger painters, there are a lot of great artists who stopped using finger paint and actually use utensils, use brushes and pencils and pens. That's what they're for. They're an extension of your finger. They give you fine control. They're fantastic. If you don't know what a pen is good for, you really don't know anything much. But so that's what they're an extension of your finger. On a screen like this, which is really high resolution, I mean, working things with your fingers is quite limited. You're limited to what you can touch, and you can use multiples, whatever, great. With this, you can point at something tiny and you can manipulate it. You can point at a tiny little thing on screen and manipulate it. And on such a high resolution screen, which is very high res and can show a lot, but also means a lot of things are very, very small. It's actually really useful to be able to point at things. Now, often the difference between touch apps and desktop apps is exactly the size of the controls, because they have to make it so that you can touch things with your fingers, so everything's large. And obviously the difference between like an iPad Office and a desktop Office is the size of the controls. With a mouse you don't need that because you're precise. That's the whole point of a mouse. If you know what a mouse is good for, you should know what a pen is good for. It's an input device. It's for pointing and manipulating. And so, as an example here, let's try old reason. I actually use this all the time, even in bed when I'm playing Scrabble and so on, because it's quite, you don't have to move your hand so far if you're just lying there. It's a bit like using a trackpad. It's nice to lie in bed and just use a trackpad, because you can manipulate things on the entire screen just by moving your finger around on a small, on a small sort of 1 or 2 inches area, 2-inch square area. You can manipulate things on the whole screen. That's quite nice to be able to do that. And you can do that with the pen as well. So you can operate stuff, and say if you're playing the game, you don't have to move things everywhere. You can just go bring them back, shuffle the things, move them around. That's quite fun to be able to do that. It's a nice way to actually work on things without having to go so far with your hands. So it's quite good like that. But getting back to this, see, so a program here like Reason, which I've used on other devices on my channel, just says this is an old program now, which is amazing because it's an incredible program, but it's old and it has no scaling whatsoever, so everything's tiny. It was made for 800 pixel screens. That's what it was made for. This actually worked on my original Windows XP tablet PC 10 years ago. This program worked on that. That device didn't have enough power to drive it to do anything much, but it worked. It ran and it filled the screen, and you could manipulate it. So here it doesn't fill the screen, and so it's not quite as handy to use it. But the other issue is it's so small that it's very hard to actually let me just undock the sequencer window here. So maybe there's the sequencer window. That's obviously not much of a track in there. Doesn't matter. Launch that. See, things get very, very small here, and with this you can actually manipulate things. You can potentially, see, you couldn't operate that, you couldn't work on that with your finger, but with this you can actually manipulate things. You can select individual notes there, even at that height. I can tap notes on the keyboard here and play them. That's the drum. That's a drum kit. Let me just open something that's got a bit of racket going on. See, so I can manipulate things here in a program that was not designed for this screen at all, and is super tiny. I mean, I'll just switch on my autofocus. Hopefully it'll focus this time. No, it's just not focusing. I don't know why. Is that going to focus? Come on. No. Hey, there we go. So things are very, very tiny in here. But for example, I can go to the patches. There we go, and then work my way through menus there. Something like that. Yeah, you can actually manipulate a program like this that's not meant to work like this. You can operate here on the racks of sequencing gear. How about the mixer at the top, which is so tiny? Look at this. Because back in these days, when this was created, an 800 pixel screen was a laptop screen. This whole screen here on a laptop would have been an 800 pixel screen. That's how big they were at that point. And so this entire mixer filled up the entire screen width. And so this demonstrates also the trouble with scaling of programs. If a program isn't made up from just standard Windows controls, but instead has a whole bunch of custom designed stuff, as this thing needs to have because look at what it is, then it can't scale. So these guys would need to actually rebuild this for a much higher resolution in order to make it work nicely on this, and if they did, that would be fantastic. But as it is, you see, I can grab the sliders here, operate them. I can grab the panning tools. I can manipulate all these things, and that works quite well. So pretty cool. You can actually manipulate things. Go into you know, patch it, open your patches like that. Quite neat. Trouble is, it's so tiny it's actually hard to see. I need to wear reading glasses to be able to get comfortable looking at this stuff. And so ultimately it's not that great, but a program like this is really waiting for a rewrite. And so for what I'm getting at, the pen is actually really nice for manipulating things in Windows. Not just drawing, but also for manipulating controls in various programs. I use it, for example, if I'm even working on code. I can actually sit there and select text, select things, and then copy and paste and do that sort of thing. Then I flip up this keyboard and do stuff. I actually sit in bed and do a bit of coding from bed, just using this keyboard. Well, I actually switched to the other keyboard here, that one there, which is terrible for typing on, but it's a standard keyboard, so I get all of the buttons, all of the numbers and arrows and everything in the right place, the colons and the slashes that I need for when I'm programming. That's actually better to use when I'm just tapping around with my keys and so on. Interesting thing about that is actually the way the software works. It's actually always trying to determine whether or not you're drawing something using the pen, and whether your hand's on the screen for palm rejection, or whether you're typing something. And it's quite funny how, you know, so I'm drawing stuff, the button's not doing anything here right now. It's disabled, so I can you know, change a pen and so on, do that. Whilst I'm resting my hand on there, if I touch it like that, it works. Go like that, it doesn't. See, it's palm rejection at work there. So that's quite neat. What was the program I was doing just then? Forgotten. Oh no, I forgot what I was talking about. Oh no, that's terrible. I looked at the screen and I noticed some scan lines on the screen, and I just completely forgot what I was talking about. That works. The palm rejection works in this case. Oh yes. So an interesting thing with the keyboard, for example, is if I maybe do some sort of typing. Sorry. Put the cursor in. See here, it's trying to determine whether I'm touching something, you know, for edit like a cursor, or if I'm drawing something like that, which is quite neat. It can differentiate between all those things. So I touch and I can start typing. But an interesting thing here is if I'm sitting there in bed, sometimes I have my pen in my right hand and I'm trying to type something going back and forth. It doesn't actually work. If you tap with that, it expects the next key to be pressed with the pen as well. So it goes ding, ding, ding. So if I go ding, 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 it goes back and forth between those two letters very nicely. But if I go like that, this isn't registering. You see, you can see the white. That's when it registers. Oh, you can't because my frame rate is so slow in this. But that registers, this doesn't. And if I start the other way, that registers. Actually, this takes precedence. The pen takes precedence over the finger. The pen is mightier than the finger on the Surface Pro 3. If you use the fingers and go back and forth, each letter comes up perfectly. It just goes back and forth as fast as you like. As soon as you bring in the pen into it, only the pen is detected. The finger is not until you stop and you start tapping only with the finger. It switches to the finger. And quite interesting, I thought. So it's with that you can sort of see what the software is doing. You can see sort of what it's trying to do. it's constantly trying to figure out what you're doing, switching between, you know, trackpads, keyboards, pens, and I suppose if you used your voice, also that. So back to the pen, because this video here is all about the pen. When I first got this, I didn't find the pen very good at all. It was actually quite awful. And there's some stuff I was mucking around with, just with the pen. So what I found, how do I clear this? I downloaded some sketch programs to see what was hide, fit to view, sketching. Is that going to give me a new one? Home, save your sketch, don't save. Okay, start. No, don't save. Home, don't save. Go Pro, start to unlock, gallery, view and edit your existing. I want it gone, take it away. One of these is an eraser, that one. Yep, there we go, that's an eraser. And one of these will, not really sure. Ooh, look, see, that draws, that erases. What I'm trying to point out with this particular program, go to the pencil, is that when I first got this device, it wouldn't give me a strong black without pressing really, really hard. I had to press way too hard to get a strong black. So hard that I thought I was going to break the screen. It was just too hard. I couldn't get a good black. At the moment here, this is actually quite light, and it's taken quite a bit of strength to give me a good black. So it's a little bit weak. They finally, after a while, released this Surface Hub program here, which is for calibrating the pen. And again, I've seen bloggers complain about this, that it doesn't do anything. It actually works pretty well. What you're trying to do is that the pen gives you a pressure from light to maximum, minimum to maximum. That's what it is. Minimum, right? This lightest level, so you're trying to get the minimum to be your barest touch, and the maximum should give you the darkest, the maximum, the blackest. And in between those two, this particular digitizer is meant to give you 256 levels. And so, once again, all the bloggers are complaining about the number of levels. It really does not matter at all, and I'll show you why. We'll show you, why in a moment. This tool, in any case, lets you calibrate it. Now, I found that mine, when I was like at default on reset, not good at all. It just wasn't giving me a good thing. So I found I had to go quite far like that in order to get a good black. Funnily enough, now with multiple driver updates, things are much better. It's much better than it was, and that's one thing I've noticed about the Surface Pro 3. The driver updates are making a difference. It's taken a while, but they make a difference to this button here. They make a difference to the pen, and they make a difference also to the Wi-Fi. That's the final thing, but that's for a different discussion. The Wi-Fi has finally come right. So this thing, I think it's pretty good. Even at the default level, straight line, it's actually good. I do tend to keep it a bit more like that, though. Probably can take it back a little bit. Yeah, you do want to be able to make a light line. I might leave it on reset at the moment. This seems to have changed again in the latest update, so I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave it at that and see what happens. So back to the drawing. Now, when I first got this, I found a few problems with drawing. One was lines, and I want to figure out how to wipe this screen. Fit to view, symmetry, symmetry, new. There we go. Save your sketch, don't save. Ta-da! There we go. New screen. One thing that it wouldn't do is give me a straight line. So I'd go like this. Please start focusing, camera. Focus. Please, focus. Come on. Oh, you silly. Don't ever buy a Logitech. Whatever the hell this is. What can I focus on? Please give me something to focus on. Come on, focus on my hand. Don't ever get a Logitech Quick Cam Pro 9000. So I'll just do that by eye. I can't really see that very well, but I'll just do that by eye. So the issue was that putting a ruler on screen and then drawing a line like that, the line would be very visibly crooked. Let me go for a pen. Is that dark? Okay. I'd look at the line. So I've just zoomed into the line, and it would be wavy. And that's a bit wavy now as well. I'll zoom back out to whatever that's meant to be. But it is improved. It's greatly improved. Point I was making was that doing this, as other reviewers do, doesn't show you what the pen does. Of course it does curves beautifully. I mean, in the old days, you know, the lag would come behind. What you really want to test is, does it let you go, say you're trying to draw grass. Just imagine you're trying to do hair or some kind of pointillist kind of thing. Can you do that? Because with a pencil or a charcoal pencil, you can. You can get nice sort of shading and so on, and you know, that's what matters, not whether you can go back and forth like that, but can you go in one direction? Can you even go dot, 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 like you can with a pencil? You know, can you even do that? That's what matters. Now what I've just done is that, and it's all right. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. That's not meant to be enlarged like that. It's meant to be shown at the size it was drawn at. That's the resolution of that. So the thing that I want to show you about the levels is, you know, because the Wacom has 1024 levels and this has 256, people go, oh no, it's going to kill me, it's not good enough. Yes, it is. It's perfectly good. Now, the way you would see 256 levels, it means that between your lightest and your hardest touch there's 256 distinct tones. If your pen was perfect and your digitizer and your calibration was perfect, you would get 256 different tones between those your lightest and hardest pressure. Chances are you don't get that. You actually get less. You know, you might get you know, depending on your calibration. Certainly when this was new, I was definitely not getting that many, because it was only giving me, it felt like about a third of that. And so, because I just couldn't get the maximum black, and now I can get the maximum black. I haven't got it calibrated properly now. I think I actually need to go back and do that again. And this may not be the best program for it, but what you will see, the way you can see the different levels, is not doing this. You know, this isn't going to show you the levels. You know, there's a level, who knows how many levels are in there. The way you would see it, if you would see it, is by doing this. Doing that. See, what I'm doing there is I'm drawing a line and then going from heavy pressure and then just letting it move off. And what I'm doing there is it's going from the heaviest and to the lightest. And if you could actually see the levels, what you would see is steps. And this isn't pixels, we're not talking pixels or resolution, is you would see tonal steps. So instead of just having a gradient and a difference in density of that line that just sort of goes, you know, there's your chart and there's your density, instead of just going up like that, what you would see is it would go one tone, then up to the next tone, to the next tone, to the next tone, the next tone, 256 times. That's what you would have to see. You'd have to be able to see that in order to say it's not good enough. Now, the place where it is most likely to be seen is not somewhere here in the dense bit in the middle. The place you're most likely to see it is in the draw-off, is where it just finishes. You might potentially see, just in the last little bit, you might see a step. You know, it's that going from 1 to 2 to 4. You might see that, but you don't. You just don't. That's the point. You just don't. I mean, noting, for example, that you know, RGB on the web, each color has this many tones in it. It's 256 for each color in RGB. It's exactly the same. This is basically RGB for one color. That's what we're getting, 256 levels of gray. That's plenty if you're actually getting them. That's the key point, is you need to get them. And so I'm not crazy about this program. I just downloaded a few sketch programs to fiddle with. Not that crazy about this. But a similar thing also happens with music when people got onto CDs. Everyone complained, all the purists complained that, oh, you know, this happens anytime you digitize something that's otherwise analog, is that you're having to give it some sort of resolution. You know, you're sampling, sample here, sample there, sample there. And with CDs, you know, the sample rate meant that the sound, you know, 44K, is broken up into that frequency, that number of samples. And so people would say, oh, I can hear it all the time. Well, you can't. The only place you can hear it, and I have heard it in a recording studio. I have heard the point in a recording where a reverb, as a reverb fell off from the maximum amount of noise down to the quietest noise level, which was super clean. On a record you don't even get down to that level because it's making such a racket with noise that you can't even get there. And so the reverb would tend to die off before you hit this, sort of after you get to the sound level of the actual playback medium. So what would happen with this, what happened in the studio though, with pure perfect reverb and this digital recording, we could just make out that as the sound went crash and the reverb went and then slowly died off, and we turned the volume up more and more and more, and we had it so loud that we could just hear at the very end, when it just went from one level to the next, we could just hear one or two steps at the very end. But it was at such a volume and such an unrealistic sort of level that it really made no difference at all. But it was interesting because it was the first time I sort of heard the sampling, heard the effect of sampling. And so the same idea applies to this line here. As it goes from dark to the very lightest bit, in theory that's where you might see the difference. If you can't see it, you're not seeing it, then there's not a problem. So that's about the digitizing quality and so on. There are some posts by one or two artists around. Look on YouTube, and also one of those cartoon guys who does one of the cartoons, the popular web cartoons from way back. He's been engaged with Microsoft. I think Microsoft, I mean, it blew me away that they didn't engage an artist really until afterwards. The thing was released, and then they got involved with some artists. This to me should be the artist's device. And if Microsoft doesn't do it, Apple will do it. This to me should be the ultimate audio recording, editing studio. That's what this should be. For DJs and musicians, this should be the ultimate recording device. It should have, you know, FireWire, whatever the latest inputs are. Your USB.3 is fine, great as well. So for recording, you can hook into mixers, FireWire mixers, that's what you want. And at the same time, for artists, this should be the best artist's device. And so they should have engaged with artists straight away about this. They should come up with a different pen for artists, maybe. Work on whatever software tweaks they need to do to make this work best for artists, because this should be that device. Yes, and that is not me, however. I am not that artist. So, what else about the pen? Let me just quickly look at my notes. Something about the software. Now I'll talk about the software in the next video, including some pen tips with that. Yeah, I have noticed also on this pen, you can pull out the tip if you're careful. First time I pulled it out, I lost it. It went ping, and it was gone. I did find it on the carpet eventually, but it pulls out, and you can get them from Microsoft. I've heard of some people wearing them out very quickly. My one, actually on close examination, is actually slightly bent like that, which is a bit weird. It looks like I've pressed it very hard, but no, it's actually a very hard, solid tip. And so I don't think that's the case. I think it's just come out of the factory like that. Doesn't really matter. It spins around. Overall a good pen. I do find, and this is I guess a software aspect, I find that the right click, I don't find that works very well. So I'll go like this. Yeah, there, I've made it come up. I don't find that I can reliably do a right click apps. So there I can do it on the desktop. Oh, see, all I'm doing is just doing the old style right click, which is the touch and release. You see, you can do that with your finger. Well, that's not the same thing. You should be able to, and my old tablet from 10 years ago do this. You just hover anywhere, like a mouse, and you press the right click button and get a right click. But you're not getting that. It doesn't come up, so I don't really see how that works. Not really sure about that. Don't really know. So that's about the pen. The screen, I will talk for a moment about the screen, but again not about the software, because I want to talk about in the next video, which I won't do tonight because it's too late. Now the screen itself has obviously the resolution 20,000 billion something or other. Let's see what it is. 2160 by 1440, and very nice. It's bright. I've seen some tests that say it's one of the best screens in terms of gamut and so on. So it's a high gamut screen. Very nice. Funnily enough, it's definitely a different white balance than this iPad here next to me, and different white balance from the RT, which is clearly not up to the same sort of level. Quite happy with the RT screens. I don't really buy into the whole Retina thing, super high res. I can read things, I can read menus perfectly well on this old 1366 screen. Here, you know, the trouble with these is you end up scaling things up because they're so high res. You end up having to scale everything up because it's, of course, it's too tiny to have it at the have things running at this resolution. So you end up scaling anything up, which sort of counters the whole point. And so, you know, in theory, you might get more pixels in your letters, but I mean, it's too small to read. It's just too small to read. And so you scale it up to a level where you could read it anyway at any resolution. You know, I still use a desktop here, which is a 92 or 100 dpi, like most people's desktops. Big deal. I can read that. I haven't got a problem with that. So the whole Retina thing to me is a little bit lost on me. It's nice to have high res. Don't get me wrong. It's nice. I don't think it's the most important thing in the world. So it's nice to have, when I in the old days would get high res. I mean, my screen here is 30-inch, 2560 pixels by 1600 pixels, my desktop. So I like a high res screen, but I want more screen real estate out of the resolution. That's what I want from the resolution, not necessarily more pixels. So this thing, it's got a beautiful screen. It's a decent resolution. It introduces a lot of scaling issues with Windows, because Windows didn't do the Apple thing where they simply waited until Samsung made big enough screens for them, to whoever made the screens at the time, in order to simply double the pixels on screen. That's how Apple did it. They solved the problem with scaling by just going twice as many pixels precisely in both directions. Windows is not like that. Windows is just all over the place. Screen sizes are just everywhere. You know, you can buy Windows devices with all kinds of resolutions. Nothing matches up. Nothing works out. So everything has to sort of scale and fit. And so it's a completely different type of scenario, and that brings in a lot of issues. Now, it's really for the software discussion to go on about how the apps look and so on. I touched on it briefly with that music program, but there's a funny situation where scaled items, scaled bitmaps look less sharp on a high-res screen than they do at their original size, original resolution on a low-res screen, even if it's displaying at approximately the same physical dimensions. And so that's a weird thing. All of a sudden something that looks perfectly good on your desktop looks fuzzy on a high-res screen. So there's sort of a downside to it as well. But this is improving all the time. You know, Microsoft is trying to fix that. The people who write the applications, of course, are aware of it now. Metro apps don't have any of these issues. It's really just old programs that have various scaling problems, and it depends on how much the old program had custom interface elements, or if it just used Windows' own interface elements. And if it used Windows' own interface elements, there's no problem. Everything looks perfect. So in any case, the brightness of the screen, I tell you what, one thing I'm constantly doing is coming in here, doing that. The brightness never works properly, the auto brightness. I have it on. Every now and then it goes ooh dark or ooh light or whatever. It's never at the right time. Never works properly. Unlike my phone, which has perfect auto brightness, this thing does not. So I'm using it like this all the time. And I'll tell you what, if there's one thing they should have put on the screen up here instead of the search or the power or the user account button, it would have been the brightness and the volume. Those are the two things on screen that I do like to use. And the volume's over there, that's okay. But I'm always going in here and using that. And so I tend to normally have it locked, the rotation, but that's a software thing we'll discuss later. Yeah. So the screen is beautifully bright, beautifully colored, suits the Metro UI perfectly, of course, so I like that. When I've got my reading glasses on, this, you know, all of a sudden pixels, you can see everything, you know, at that level, all of a sudden you're seeing pixels. It's nice to work with. That's about all I can say about it. So both of those items I think are a big plus. The pen is a big plus, if you know what to do with a pen, and the screen is certainly the nicest tablet and one of the nicest laptop screens around. And I think I will leave this video at that. I've probably gone on too long with this one. So thank you again for watching. Maybe look for the next video in this long and boring series, which will be about software, Windows, drivers, just generally talking about Windows at that point. So thanks again for watching, and might catch you in the next one. Okay, bye-bye.